Okay, go ahead.
Outstanding. Okay. What we're going to cover in this next
Introduce
segment.
yourself, sir.
What?
Introduce yourself.
Who, me?
Yeah.
Why don't you go ahead? You do the introduction this time.
Okay. Welcome. My name is David Shoemaker. This is Doc Okert. We, between us, have way too many years of experience working on this kind of stuff, 30 plus-ish, with a combined collection over 200 pieces of pinball and video. We're going to show you a bit about lamp matrix.
We're gonna discuss general illumination versus feature lamps.
Versus feature lamp.
First,
So,
yeah.
okay.
And we've got a couple of different static pieces. This static piece is a pinbot that was loaned to us specifically for this. The other thing that we have is we have a lamps diagram out of a Bad Cats. Slightly different animals, both System 11, really doesn't matter. The majority of pinball lamps are the same. There's a very few small nuances that are different in between machines and manufacturers. One of the biggest problems that we get is when we get phone calls for repair and people say, my lamps don't work. And they can't tell me, your lamps don't work. And I go, oh, okay. Well, my cat doesn't like dog food. It means nothing. When I say, are we talking feature lamps or are we talking GI?
GI stands for General Illumination.
I get, a lot of times I get dead phone or I get total silence, and it's the same. And we did not boot up for some reason.
Yeah, I noticed that too. So, actually, we can use this as a point. You see, all these lamps are on. There's a variety in the playfield, usually under the edge of plastics, under pop bumpers, a few spots on the back glass. If the glass was on, you'd see it was the name and the machine and a few things like that. These are, in most cases, always on lamps. These are general illumination. They're illuminating parts of the playfield that don't tend to be under computer control. Now, they may flash occasionally because they've got a circuit that runs a relay that can turn on and off the general illumination. Now, if you get things like in the playfield, in this case there's a big matrix of lights. If it's things that light up when you make a shot, those are feature lamps. Those are controlled by a feature of the hardware. Now, normally when you boot a machine, you'll see all the GI comes on and an attract mode will start up. You'll start seeing various flashing things to attract people to come and play your game. We're noticing no flashy, which tells us something's gone wrong. Machine hasn't fully booted. We have other things that tell us that. These, don't touch those, there's high voltage there. That makes things, ouch. Yes, I've done it. He laughed at me.
We just didn't decide whether it was the plus 100 volts that got him or the negative 100 volts. Either way, he took it all.
All right. Now in this case, we're not going there. In this case, we can see we do not have the blanking running, so the system has not booted correctly. And now we have flashy lights.
Okay.
We have flashy lights.
I am so glad this is not my machine. Okay. Now we have our feature lamps.
No,
This is a combination of the relay that David was just talking about in the general illumination. Now when the general illumination flashes, it will flash them all because they're all tied in series. And the beings are all tied in series. That's the only thing they can do with general illumination. They can't hit one at a time or two at a time.
And this, they're not going to do they're not going to do marquee styling because it's all one light as far as the computer's concerned.
Throughout the history of pinball, and this is from the inception of putting lamps, general illumination lamps in pinball, all the way up until the last couple of years, where folks like Stern and Jersey Jack Pinball have used LEDs for general illumination. Up until that point, every general illumination circuit was designed wrong. And when I say wrong, it was over amped. And the reason that, there's several reasons they did it. One, because they could put a lot of lights on a string and it looked really cool. And it was cheap. But the real reason is that if you ever looked at the manufacturer's warranty from back in the day, it was 90 days. You were expected to make your money on this $2,800 machine in 90 days. If it didn't live to 91, manufacturer didn't care. Okay, now that this is 30 years old and you've overamped this circuit for 30 years, your headers and connectors are going to burn up. One of the best things that any pinball owner can do of an older machine is to go to LEDs in general illumination, for one, but you also replace the connector and the header for the GI. If you just replace the connector and not the header, you'll get anywhere from 3 weeks to 6 months, and it'll burn up again. And we've proven this on many different occasions.
Okay. Any questions at this point? You guys are quiet today.
So I have a Pharaoh,
Okay.
which has split GI,
Okay.
and they're both on relays. And I have one that sometimes works and sometimes doesn't.
Okay.
So,
Can you hear the relay clicking?
no. So,
Okay.
But I can go in and kind of mess with the wires. The wires all look okay. I can reseat them and it works okay.
Okay.
I don't know which end it is really.
I can
All right.
tell you which end that is. That's easy. And this is all very common in Williams. We work on a lot of Williams stuff. And Williams uses a lot of these little connectors right here, like this guy. And they're .062 connectors.
Molex branded.
Molex brand, yeah. And for example, we had a Black Knight that got brought to a repair party, and he had upper GI and no lower. And then after a few minutes, he had no upper GI. And he wiggled it around, then he had lower GI but no upper. And what happens is that you've stressed those pins for 30 years. And the amperage draw is so high, and as it wears and ages, the amperage draw is actually getting higher than it was originally designed. So with your male pin and your female pin, right, as it heats up, a couple minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, the female expands. When it expands, now it's just like wiggling back and forth. So it may work and it may not work. My suggestion is to repin the connector where they connect together.
Okay. And that was
Yeah.
the piece that I actually tried to work on. I checked to see that the relay was working okay. That seemed to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, it worked for a few hours and then stopped again.
Yeah, that's
And then once it stops, it stops. I turn it back
Right.
on and it stops again, so it's not expanding away from it. Just-
when you turn it off and then turn it back on, it works again.
No, not immediately.
No, it
Right,
takes
that's
time.
because
it takes time to
for it to
cool
cool.
down, and as it cools down, it reseats.
Right, but I mean, the next time I turn it on a week later, it still is on.
Oh, okay. So, real common problem with all of these is, these headers, if you actually go and read the manufacturer's specs on these headers,
The manufacturer of the header.
the header, it's going to say insertion cycles, and it's going to say a number like 30. That's how many times they expected that to last, pulled off and pushed back on. if you could find a machine anywhere that has been done less than 200 times, I'd be very surprised. Part of this is what's happening is that there's a tin plating over the contact, and then the pin is there, and they rub. So this is where you'll say, oh, I wiggled the connector and it worked. Like, because you broke the oxidation layer, and now you've got bare metal-ish, but you still got oxidation there. This is one of the biggest problems with these machines is going through and reheadering them. It's a sizable amount of work, and if you do it wrong, you've ruined something. If you don't know what you're doing, ask somebody that does, or
The headers are soldered to the board.
these are soldered to the board, and so these headers are what's known as IDC, or insulation displacement connectors. When they made them, there's a fork in the actual header, and they shove the wire down in that, which cuts through the insulation and gets the wire touching this fork.
Very, very much
Now
like
you
a
do
trailer
this
splice.
and this. It's cutting. It was designed to cut through insulation. Well, eventually it also starts cutting through the wire. And on a lot of these, this one in particular, you can come up and look at this in a minute, but it's going literally like this, in and back out into the rest of the system. So now you've got this thing, it's gonna do this, and it's gonna scissor that wire in half. I don't know how many times I've gone, okay, checking, oh, that's half of the wire, and the other half's still down there. And now I'm gonna have to splice this, put another, But they did this because they could manufacture them on an assembly line very quickly. And as he said, 90 days, they don't care. Once it's made some money, they're done. The manufacturer makes just about no money on selling you one of those headers. So they didn't want to. They make you money. They got to sell you a coffin to make any money.
We have a question from our online audience.
Shoot.
Okay, I recently bought my first pin, a Joker's. As I'm cleaning it up, I'm finding bulb and entire sockets and wiring missing. Tracing them back to the boards, it looks like some of the wires from the Molex were cut. Where should I start? Do I try first to rebuild the connectors on the interconnect board? Is it easier to replace that board entirely? Not quite sure how to know if it can be saved. The missing sockets and bulbs are a mix of feature and GI, mostly GI. None of the illumination works. Thank you very much for listening to my question.
Well, anything can be saved. It's just how deep do you want to get into it? Correct me if I'm wrong. Joker's is a Gottlieb, is that correct? Is that right?
I don't remember.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Joker poker. If it is in fact a Gottlieb, your best place to go is Steve Young's Pinball Resource. They own all the rights to all the Gottlieb stuff, and unfortunately, since he did buy the rights, he's kind of a Nazi about the manuals. You have to buy them from him, otherwise you can't get them. He won't let anybody post them online.
Joker's is a Williams System 11B.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that one. Thank you.
We can only remember so much when you've got so much.
Being it's a Williams System 11B, that's very repairable. Unless it caught on fire, yeah.
Okay,
You
so
can fix that.
with anything like this, you start at the headers. With the power off, you can pull your header. Looking at the connector, is any of it brown? Is it any of it brittle? Does anything look like it's missing? Now there should be a key pin on these. That is supposed to be missing. This is your first step. You can look to see if one is overheated. It will be very common for the connector to have gotten discolored. If it's discolored, you need to replace it.
On the particular Jokers, with your manual, in the manual, in the back there is an interconnect diagram. And the interconnect diagram will tell you what goes from each header to each other header or where it actually goes, if it goes to a lamp socket or what. It's in the back of the manual.
So you can rewire that. You know, if you've got a socket missing for, you know, in this case, Venus. The socket's been missing for whatever reason. Probably it was just oxidized. They replaced it. They took it out and didn't finish the job. So you'd go there, okay. You look in the manual. This is where this stuff comes up. You say, okay, lamp number 45. All right, you look at that. Look at the schematic diagram. It's going to show you the lamp matrix if it's a feature lamp. And it'll show you this wire and this diode controlled lamp number 45. You've got one side that's shared amongst the row and one that's shared amongst the column. If they've done, without seeing the machine, it's hard to say for sure just what they've done, but if they've like ripped out an entire column, you go back, it'll tell you at the top of the matrix which header and which pin that should have been.
We will cover that in the lamp matrix that we're going to go into next. But there's also going to be a drawing in your manual, just like the lamps one that we have for Bad Cats, that'll tell you everywhere that you should have a feature lamp, and it'll call it out. So if they pulled lamps and they were in the bottom of the cabinet or they were hanging or whatever, that drawing there in connection with your interconnect drawing should match up to tell you where the hanging stuff or the stuff in the bottom of the cabinet actually used to belong. Does that answer kind of what you were asking on the jokers?
You've got a project, guaranteed. This is a project.
Are those headers and the connectors that plug into them typically Molex products?
These are all Molex 156s. The ones we get nowadays tend to be black.
And square as opposed
and
to
squares. Yeah. So one thing, they used round pins in these, which you have a round pin and you have a wiper. So you get this little tiny contact patch. You'd use the modern ones, they're a square pin, so you're doing this to a wiper. And then we tend to replace these with what are known as trifuricon pins. So they're actually U-shaped. There's the wiper that was normally there, and then two sides. So now you're connecting a square pin on 3 areas. You're going to last probably the lifetime of the machine if you go through and completely replace them. Now, if you repin this header and you don't change the pins on the actual PCB, you're going to be just asking for your problems a little bit later. It will work for a while. We won't warranty that work. If you replace just the pins on the PCB, you don't replace the pins in the headers, same deal. These things have worn little grooves or little burn spots on the actual headers and the connectors. Anybody, I don't know how many times I've heard, well, I reseated it and it worked. I'm like, yeah, okay for now.
Did we actually answer your question, or did we get sidetracked? And it happens to us sometimes, so I want to touch base and make sure that
So, your relays, so.
Right, well, it sounds like I need to check. The relay is probably fine. I need to make sure that I don't have a problem with the wire. I need to make sure that the interconnect from the upper to the lower.
Yeah, so.
The connector to the controller board itself that
Yeah.
drives the relay.
Yes.
So your relay could have a burned contact internally, but you can replace the relay with a multimeter, jam the leads into well, it depends. Depending on the unit, if the relay is soldered to the board, it's a little harder to do. Some of the earlier Williams,
Underneath.
if it's got where it's got pins on it, you can pull that relay, put in the leads from a
What I
multimeter.
don't have is any measure of what the relay part is.
Are
I don't have that listed anywhere.
okay, are we talking about a board that's about this
There's
big?
actually a relay, a little block relay that's
It's the ice cube.
straight into the
It's an ice cube.
board.
Okay,
It's the Williams ice cube.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, everybody calls them the Williams ice cube because they're blue covered usually.
blue or yellow.
Yeah, somebody's got those. Go up and talk to Marco.
Sure.
He'll be able to tell you if he doesn't have them.
He should
He,
know.
he
who
should
does.
have, or definitely will know who. But your relay is probably okay. Making sure you've got control signals into the relay working correctly is your first step. But then you're going back to, if you're not getting those control signals well, going back up, the relays are run as solenoids. So you're looking at the solenoid matrix in almost every case.
And we're going to cover that today too.
Yeah, well, yeah, we're busy guys.
Yeah.
Friday, it's the Friday show for Dave and Doc. David. My name's David.
About 5 minutes.
Yeah, we're into the Matrix this year.
But once you know, yes or no, you've got signal at the relay, then bypass everything else, go up to where it is at the board, and check you're getting it there. This is all meter work. Standard multimeter you can get at Radio Shack will do what you need. Once you know either end, then you can start looking for failures. Sometimes there's interconnects. I know on like my Black Knight, one of the joys of with the older pins is you take the head off and you've got all the connectors going to the boards, but then you've got a whole series of these connectors connecting the head to the coffin. And then under that, you've got more connectors. So yeah, joy, joy, joy.
Yeah, I found that the connectors on the circuit boards themselves and the headers are just unbelievably stiff.
Stiff is,
They've got kind of plastic that holds the other piece
Yeah.
in, and so I've actually like cut my hand getting it loose.
yep.
It finally gave way.
Yeah, not the first time I've done that.
So
Yeah.
is there a newer?
The newer connectors, well,
If I replace them all?
if you go through and replace them with the square pins and the new trifuricons, they're not as stiff. These IDCs, they always, well, they want them to
the
hold.
IDCs do get brittle,
Yeah.
and when they get stiff like you're talking about, they,
More of the ones that are the point, the .156.
Yeah,
point
yeah,
156.
Those ones where it's just the single row.
yeah, these.
Higher amperage.
okay.
Yeah.
Just incredible.
Yeah.
If they're extremely stiff, are they the locking ramp type? If they're the locking ramp type, you can actually file down the locking ramp a little bit, and that makes them not as stiff.
I'm not sure how to describe what it does. I mean, it has a little side piece that comes up.
Yeah.
That's the locking ramp.
Yeah, there's that.
That's
and
a locking
yeah.
ramp.
You know, part of it is, trying to even disconnect them. The board isn't terribly well supported and it flexes while I'm trying to pull it.
Yes.
Take a Dremel with the sanding drum, and it takes about 30 seconds. You just sand that down smooth. Or you can buy the ones without the locking ramp, and you won't have that problem.
On the
Yeah.
connector. Once
Yeah.
After I get it off, which is the hard part.
Right.
Yeah. So
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing that you can do, as long as you have the power off, is you can take like a scribe or what we refer to as a tweaker. It's this very small screwdriver, and you can actually pry in between the pins to help get that off.
You can come in to the back and give it a little bit of a nudge, or
Yeah.
put the screwdriver in and twist just a little.
Yeah, that will not damage the board. Well, it should not damage the board.
Now, one thing you may be having a problem with, as you're talking about when you flex the board a bit, if everything seems okay, but you wiggle things a little bit, and that worked, that didn't, you've probably got cracked solder joints on the back of the board. Pulling the board
that's
off.
also common on the back of these headers.
Real common on these
I've
headers.
been doing a bunch of other work, like in the display
Mm-hmm.
boards.
Mhm.
I have some flickering going on there.
Sure.
And I have a desolder and a microscope, and I've looked and seen that, the pins are completely missing the solder.
Yeah.
Some of those pins before I go and replace them.
Yeah.
So it's like luck that it was still connected somewhere internally.
Oh, sure.
It was interesting seeing
yeah.
how extremely
Weak it
they
is.
had changed.
Oh, yeah.
I recently had a board I was looking at for someone. Resistors on the driver board had fallen off the board, because the solder had gotten so hot, it liquefied, and this big
System 7
3 amp
Hyperball, 3-watt resistor,
fell off the board.
several of them.
And
And,
like-
and it was not uncommon.
And I went to look at it, I'm like, wait, there's a part missing. Oh, there it is. What the? That shouldn't happen. More questions, more anything.
Okay, I think we're going to slide on.
Okay,
We
Right,
need
this
a
is
couple
our-
minutes because we need to bring over the other, we'll have both
The
of
other
those.
chart, yeah.
There's two of them.
the other one up there.